Hours after protests erupt in Communist China, President Biden releases concerning statement on human rights.
History is unfolding in Communist China. Not that CNN will tell you about it.
Chinese citizens, sick and tired of their government's zero-COVID lockdowns, protested throughout the weekend.
Sites like this have become common in China.
Residents are refusing to put up with this treatment anymore. But they were demanding more than just an end to lockdowns. They were actually calling for an end to the Chinese Communist Party.
This is no joke.
Posts on Twitter reveal protesters calling for President Xi to be removed from power.
Chinese citizens were chanting freedom in displays unseen in more than a generation. Naturally, the harsh, totalitarian regime is cracking down.
For groups of protesters, apparently without central coordination, to take to the streets across China and to social media, and for some then explicitly to call for Xi and the Communist Party to stand aside, is a seismic shock. Xi is unlikely to tolerate dissent for long, since he is likely to see the protests as a challenge not to just his COVID policy but to collectivist communist ideology and his authority. Quickly, CCP-controlled police were seen brutally beating protesters. They were arresting everyone in sight and even forcing residents to scrub footage of the protests from their phones.
But it doesn't seem like this is the end of the protests. Which raises an obvious question: where is the Biden administration? Democrats are quick to jump behind protests, right?
Especially those protesting human rights abuses.
Biden was oddly silent over the weekend as Chinese residents fought for freedom.
Finally, his failed presidency released a statement. It was far from impressive. New statement out from the White House as protests break out in China over the government's zero-COVID policies. Wow, I guess the left's support for human rights ends when Communist China is involved.
Biden was silent on the protests.
He refused to support people demanding freedom from a corrupt regime. Instead, the statement only commented on China's COVID policy and trumpeted Biden's own failed policies.
No mention of the historic, unprecedented protests, Joe? Oh, I see.
Democrats are all for civil unrest, when it only helps them win elections in America. When people in other countries protest corrupt governments like China's, which is an ally to the left, Democrats are silent.
Biden doesn't support these protests because he is in bed with Xi.
Democrats, and even some Republicans, have long ago sold their souls for CCP cash. They will never oppose Xi and his evil, communist agenda because they are all but partners with him.